Beneath the dark waves of our world's oceans lie secrets that have haunted mankind for thousands of years. The sea holds mysteries so deep and strange that even today's best scientists cannot explain them. From ghost ships that sail forever through empty waters to ancient cities that vanished without a trace, the ocean keeps its secrets locked away in the crushing depths where no light can reach. Tonight, we dive into the most puzzling mysteries of the ancient seas, stories that will make you question everything you think you know about our world's waters. If you're enjoying this journey into the unknown, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss our latest explorations into history's greatest mysteries. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We love hearing from viewers all around the globe, and if you want to support our work even more and help us create better content, consider becoming a channel member, which gives us the resources to dive deeper into these incredible stories. Now, let's return to the depths where reality becomes stranger than any tale ever told. The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet, yet we have explored less than 5% of its vast underwater world. This means that 90% of our seas remain completely unknown to us. Think about that for a moment. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the bottom of our own oceans. In these unexplored depths, strange things happen that our modern minds struggle to understand. Ships disappear without sending any distress calls. Entire fleets vanish as if they never existed. Ancient civilizations that once ruled the waves simply fade from history, leaving behind only whispers and legends that grow stranger with each telling. But these are not just old stories passed down by sailors in dark taverns. These mysteries have real evidence behind them. Archaeological finds that don't match what we know about ancient technology. Underwater ruins that shouldn't exist, according to our history books. Strange objects pulled up in fishing nets that scientists cannot identify. Radio signals coming from empty ocean where no ships should be sailing. These discoveries force us to ask difficult questions about what really happened in our ancient past. The first mystery that has puzzled experts for over 70 years involves a massive underwater structure discovered off the coast of Western Ireland. In 1951, a fishing boat captain named Old Tom was searching for a good spot to drop his nets when his depth finder began showing impossible readings. According to his equipment, there was something huge sitting on the ocean floor, something that looked like it had been built rather than formed by nature. The structure appeared to be over 2 miles long and perfectly straight, like a giant wall running along the sea floor. Old Tom reported his find to the local authorities, but they didn't believe him at first. How could there be a wall on the bottom of the ocean? No ancient civilization had the technology to build underwater structures that massive. But when marine archaeologist Dr. Sarah Stone heard about the discovery, she knew she had to investigate. Dr. Stone had spent her entire career studying underwater ruins, and she had learned never to dismiss strange reports from experienced fishermen. 3 months later, Dr. Stone led the first official expedition to examine Old Tom's underwater wall. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about ancient construction. The structure was indeed massive, stretching as far as their underwater cameras could see in both directions. But even more shocking was how it was built. The wall was made from blocks of stone, each one weighing several tons. These blocks were cut so precisely that they fit together without any mortar or cement holding them in place. The craftsmanship was so perfect that you couldn't slide a knife blade between the stones. But here's what made the discovery truly mysterious. According to every geology expert who examined the stones, the type of rock used to build the wall doesn't exist anywhere in that part of the ocean. In fact, the closest place where such stone can be found is over 3,000 miles away on a completely different continent. How did ancient builders transport massive stone blocks across thousands of miles of open ocean? What tools did they use to cut the stone so perfectly? And most puzzling of all, why would anyone want to build a wall on the bottom of the sea? Dr. Stone's team spent 2 years studying the underwater wall, but every answer they found only led to more questions. Carbon dating tests on organic material found trapped between the stones suggested the wall was built over 8,000 years ago. This means it was constructed during a time when most human societies were still living in simple villages and had barely learned to work with metal tools. Yet the engineering skill required to build such a structure would challenge even today's best construction companies. The mystery deepened when Dr. Stone's team discovered that the wall wasn't alone. Using advanced sonar mapping, they found evidence of other structures nearby. There appeared to be buildings, roads, and what looked like a massive harbor complex, all buried under centuries of sand and sea growth. The entire site covered an area larger than most modern cities. Someone had built an underwater metropolis thousands of years ago, and then it had been completely forgotten by history. News of the discovery spread quickly through the archaeological community, and soon experts from around the world were asking to study the site. But the Western Island government, worried about treasure hunters and unauthorized diving, declared the area off-limits to everyone except approved researchers. This decision would prove to be both wise and frustrating. Wise because it protected the site from damage, but frustrating because it severely limited how much research could be done. Over the next 20 years, only a handful of scientific expeditions were allowed to visit the underwater city. Each one brought back more questions than answers. They found evidence of advanced metallurgy, including bronze and iron tools that shouldn't have existed when the city was built. They discovered pottery, decorated with symbols that didn't match any known ancient writing system. Most mysteriously, they found what appeared to be glass objects that had been manufactured with techniques not invented until the modern era. But the strangest discovery came in 1973, when marine biologist Dr. James River was studying fish populations around the underwater ruins. Dr. River was using a remote-controlled camera to film the sea life when he noticed something moving between the ancient buildings. At first, he thought it might be a large fish, or maybe a small whale. But when he reviewed the footage later, he realized he was looking at something much more unusual. The camera had captured images of what appeared to be artificial lights moving through the ruins. These weren't reflections from the surface or bioluminescent sea creatures. They were steady, white lights that seemed to be following the ancient streets and pathways. The lights appeared for several minutes in the footage, moving in patterns that suggested intelligence behind their movement. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights vanished into the depths of the ruined city. Dr. River showed the footage to his colleagues, but nobody could explain what they were seeing. Some suggested the lights might be from another research submarine that hadn't been properly reported. Others thought they might be some unknown type of sea creature that produced unusually bright bioluminescence. But Dr. River had checked with all the marine research stations in the area, and no other submarines had been operating near the site that day. The mystery of the moving lights was never solved. But it wasn't the last strange thing to happen at the underwater city. Over the years, several other research teams reported seeing unexplained lights in the ruins. Some witnesses described the lights as moving in formation, as if they were being controlled by some kind of intelligence. Others reported hearing strange sounds coming from the structures, sounds that their underwater microphones couldn't properly record, but that the divers could feel vibrating through their bodies. These reports led to wild theories about what might be happening in the ancient ruins. Some people suggested that the city wasn't as abandoned as it appeared. Maybe some unknown group of people still lived in the underwater structures, using advanced technology to survive beneath the waves. Others proposed that the lights were evidence of alien visitors who had built the city as an underwater base. The most scientific theory suggested that the lights were caused by some type of natural electrical phenomenon created by the interaction between the metal objects in the ruins and the salt water of the ocean. But Dr. Stone, who had become the leading expert on the underwater city, had her own theory. She believed that the ancient builders of the city had possessed knowledge and technology that was far more advanced than historians had ever imagined. The precision of the stonework, the advanced metallurgy, and the sophisticated urban planning all suggested a civilization that had reached a high level of development thousands of years before such achievements were supposed to be possible. Dr. Stone spent the rest of her career trying to unlock the secrets of the underwater city, but the ocean kept most of its mysteries hidden. Every expedition brought new discoveries, but also new questions that seemed impossible to answer. The city remained a puzzle that challenged everything archaeologists thought they knew about ancient human capabilities and the history of our world's civilizations. The discovery of the underwater city off Western Island was just the beginning of a much larger mystery that would challenge our understanding of ancient maritime civilizations. As researchers dug deeper into historical records, they began to find references to similar underwater structures in the most unexpected places. Ancient texts from the Library of Sun Harbor, one of the oldest collections of maritime documents in the world, contained dozens of sailor accounts describing mysterious ruins beneath the waves. These accounts, written by ship captains and traders from over 15 different cultures, all described remarkably similar underwater cities located in various parts of the world's oceans. The consistency of these reports, spanning centuries and coming from completely unconnected sources, suggested that the Western Island discovery was not an isolated case, but part of a much larger pattern of lost civilizations that had somehow ended up beneath the sea. Captain William Blackwater, a renowned explorer who had spent 40 years sailing the world's most dangerous waters, became fascinated by these ancient accounts after hearing about Dr. Stone's underwater city. Captain Blackwater had always been interested in maritime history, but the discovery at Western Island made him realize that the old sailor stories he had collected over the decades might contain more truth than anyone had imagined. In his private collection of maritime artifacts and documents, Captain Blackwater had accumulated over 300 accounts of mysterious underwater structures, strange lights beneath the waves, and encounters with unexplained phenomena in remote ocean regions. These stories came from sailors, fishermen, pearl divers, and naval officers representing cultures from every continent on Earth. One of the most intriguing documents in Captain Blackwater's collection was a ship's log from the merchant vessel Morning Star, which had sailed the trade route of the Eastern Seas in the year 1647. The captain of the Morning Star, a man named Thomas Goldbrook, had recorded an encounter that perfectly matched what modern researchers were finding at underwater archaeological sites. According to Captain Goldbrook's log, his ship had been forced to seek shelter from a violent storm near the remote Coral Islands, a chain of tiny atolls in the middle of the vast Eastern Ocean. While waiting for the weather to clear, Captain Goldbrook had decided to explore the crystal-clear waters around the islands, using a primitive diving bell that his crew had constructed for pearl diving. What Captain Goldbrook found beneath the Coral Islands changed his understanding of the world forever. At a depth of approximately 60 feet, he discovered a vast complex of stone buildings that appeared to be in perfect condition despite being completely submerged. The structures were built from the same type of precisely cut stone blocks that Dr. Stone's team had found at Western Island, and they were arranged in a pattern that suggested a highly organized urban center. Captain Goldbrook described wide streets paved with smooth stones, elaborate temples with carved columns, and residential areas with dozens of individual buildings connected by covered walkways and bridges. But what made Captain Goldbrook's account truly extraordinary was his description of the preservation of these underwater ruins. Unlike most underwater archaeological sites, where centuries of sea growth and erosion have damaged or completely obscured ancient structures, the buildings beneath the Coral Islands appeared to be protected by some unknown process. The stone surfaces were clean and unmarked by marine growth, the carved decorations were still clearly visible, and even wooden elements of the construction appeared to be intact. Captain Goldbrook noted that the water inside the buildings was perfectly clear, as if some invisible barrier was preventing normal underwater decay from occurring. Captain Goldbrook spent 3 days exploring the underwater city before the weather cleared enough for his ship to continue its journey. During this time, he made detailed drawings of the buildings and artifacts he observed, and he carefully recorded measurements and descriptions of the construction techniques used by the ancient builders. His sketches showed architectural features that wouldn't be seen in European construction for another 200 years, including advanced drainage systems, earthquake-resistant building methods, and sophisticated urban planning concepts that seemed far ahead of their time. The Morning Star's log also contained Captain Goldbrook's account of a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his life. On his final dive into the underwater city, he had ventured into what appeared to be a large public building, possibly a temple or government center. In the main hall of this building, Captain Goldbrook found dozens of stone tablets covered with inscriptions in an unknown script. The tablets appeared to be some kind of historical record or library, carefully arranged on stone shelves that ran along the walls of the chamber. But what disturbed Captain Goldbrook was not the existence of these ancient documents, but the fact that some of them appeared to describe events that hadn't happened yet. According to his log, several of the stone tablets contained detailed drawings and descriptions of ships, weapons, and technologies that wouldn't be invented for centuries. One tablet showed what appeared to be a steam-powered vessel, complete with detailed engineering drawings that wouldn't be developed until the 1800s. Another described flying machines that resembled modern aircraft, with specifications for their construction and operation. Most unsettling of all, several tablets contained accurate maps of continents and islands that European explorers hadn't discovered yet, including detailed charts of the New World coastline that wouldn't be explored until decades after Captain Goldbrook's voyage. Captain Goldbrook made copies of as many inscriptions as he could during his limited time underwater, but he kept his discoveries secret for many years. He was afraid that reporting such impossible findings would destroy his reputation as a reliable sea captain and navigator. It wasn't until near the end of his life that he finally shared his account with a trusted friend, Professor Edmund Hartwell of the Maritime Academy at Harbour Town. Professor Hartwell was skeptical of the story at first, but when Captain Goldbrook showed him the detailed drawings and measurements he had made, the professor realized that the account was too precise and consistent to be a fabrication. Professor Hartwell spent the last 10 years of his career trying to organize an expedition to the Coral Islands to verify Captain Goldbrook's claims, but the remote location and dangerous sailing conditions made such a journey extremely difficult with the technology available at the time. Several attempts were made to reach the islands, but storms, equipment failures, and navigation problems prevented any of the expeditions from completing their missions. Professor Hartwell died in 1703 without ever seeing the underwater city that Captain Goldbrook had described, but he left behind extensive notes and plans for future exploration of the site. These historical accounts became crucial pieces of evidence when modern researchers began investigating the broader pattern of underwater archaeological sites around the world. Dr. Stone and her colleagues realized that Captain Goldbrook's description of the Coral Islands city matched almost perfectly with what they were finding at Western Island and other underwater sites. The same precision stonework, the same advanced urban planning, and the same mysterious preservation of ancient structures in underwater environments. This consistency across different time periods and locations suggested that all of these sites might be connected to the same ancient civilization. But the most intriguing connection came when Dr. Stone's team discovered that the symbols carved on the buildings at Western Island matched some of the inscriptions that Captain Goldbrook had copied from the stone tablets at the Coral Islands. Using computer analysis and historical linguistics, researchers were able to determine that both sites used the same writing system and architectural style, despite being located thousands of miles apart in different oceans. This meant that whoever built these underwater cities had possessed not only advanced construction technology, but also the maritime capabilities to establish colonies and trading networks across vast distances of open ocean. The implications of this discovery were staggering. If the same civilization had built underwater cities in multiple locations around the world, then they must have had a level of maritime technology that far exceeded what historians believed was possible for ancient peoples. They would have needed large, seaworthy vessels capable of carrying massive stone blocks across thousands of miles of ocean. They would have required advanced navigation techniques to find and establish settlements in remote island locations. Most importantly, they would have needed some method of constructing elaborate buildings underwater, a feat that challenges even modern engineering capabilities. Dr. Stone began to develop a theory that these underwater cities had not originally been built beneath the sea, but had been constructed on dry land and then submerged by some catastrophic event. This would explain both the advanced construction techniques and the remarkable preservation of the structures. If the cities had been rapidly buried underwater by a sudden change in sea level, they might have been protected from normal weathering and decay processes, but this theory raised even more questions about what kind of disaster could have caused such dramatic changes in ocean levels, and whether such events might happen again in the future. Dr. Stone's theory about sudden sea level changes began to gain support from an unexpected source when marine geologist Dr. Pavel Novak joined her research team in the spring of 1998. Dr. Novak had spent his career studying underwater rock formations and sediment layers that told the story of ancient ocean changes. He brought with him decades of data about sea level fluctuations that had occurred throughout human history. When Dr. Novak examined the sediment samples from around the Western Island underwater city, he found evidence that supported Dr. Stone's ideas about rapid submersion. The layers of sand and silt that covered the ancient buildings showed signs of having been deposited very quickly, as if a massive flood or tsunami had buried the entire city in a matter of days rather than the gradual process that normally covers underwater structures over centuries. But even more interesting was what Dr. Novak found beneath the city itself. Deep core samples taken from the bedrock under the ruins revealed something that changed everything the team thought they knew about the site. The ancient builders hadn't just constructed their city on the seafloor. They had built it on what was once dry land, complete with evidence of ancient rivers, forests, and even farmland. Pollen samples from deep in the sediment showed that the area around the underwater city had once been home to oak trees, wheat fields, and meadows filled with wildflowers. Carbon dating of these organic remains indicated that the land had been above sea level as recently as 8,000 years ago, exactly matching the age of the city's construction. This meant that when the ancient builders were laying the foundation stones for their massive walls and temples, they were working under blue skies and warm sunshine, not beneath the cold, dark waters where the ruins now lay hidden. The discovery of this ancient landscape raised new questions about what had caused such a dramatic change in sea level. Dr. Novak began searching through historical records and geological data from around the world, looking for evidence of similar rapid flooding, events that might have occurred 8,000 years ago. What he found was a pattern of catastrophic flooding stories from cultures across the globe, all dating to approximately the same time period. From the flood myths of ancient Babylon to the deluge legends of Native American tribes, dozens of different civilizations had preserved stories of a great flood that had destroyed an earlier world. These weren't just religious stories or myths. They contained specific details about the timing, duration, and effects of massive flooding events that matched what Dr. Novak was finding in the geological record. One of the most detailed accounts came from the archives of an ancient monastery on Moon Mountain, where monks had preserved oral traditions dating back thousands of years. Brother Jan's Fetlet, the monastery's keeper of ancient texts, showed Dr. Novak a collection of stone tablets that told the story of the Great Waters, a catastrophic flood that had destroyed an advanced civilization known as the Sea Kings. According to these tablets, the Sea Kings had built magnificent cities along the coasts of all the world's oceans. They were master shipbuilders and navigators who had established trade routes connecting every continent on Earth. Their cities were marvels of engineering, with towering temples, sophisticated harbors, and underground systems that brought fresh water from distant mountain springs. But the Sea Kings had grown proud and careless. They had forgotten the old warnings about respecting the power of the ocean. They built their cities right at the water's edge, confident that their engineering skills could protect them from any storm or flood. They constructed massive breakwaters and seawalls that they believed would keep their cities safe forever. They filled in wetlands and built on unstable ground, always expanding their cities further into the sea. The ancient tablets described how the Sea Kings had even built floating platforms and artificial islands, pushing the boundaries of their civilization far from the natural shoreline. Then, according to Brother Svtl's tablets, the great waters came without warning. The ocean rose not gradually over many years, but all at once, as if some invisible dam had burst deep beneath the sea. Within 3 days and 3 nights, all of the Sea Kings' coastal cities were swallowed by the waves, their great harbors filled with sand and debris. Their towering temples disappeared beneath hundreds of feet of churning water. The few survivors who managed to escape to higher ground watched helplessly as their entire civilization vanished into the depths of the angry sea. Dr. Novak was fascinated by the specific details in these ancient accounts. The tablets described engineering techniques and architectural features that matched exactly what his team was finding at underwater archaeological sites around the world. They mentioned the precise stonework, the advanced drainage systems, and the sophisticated urban planning that characterized all of the submerged cities. But most importantly, they described the same mysterious preservation that Captain Goldbrook had noted at the Coral Islands. According to the tablets, the Sea Kings had possessed a special knowledge of how to protect their buildings from decay and damage. This knowledge had somehow continued to work even after their cities were buried beneath the sea. As Dr. Novak delved deeper into the historical records, he began to find references to other survivors of the Great Waters. Small groups of Sea Kings had apparently escaped the flooding by sailing to remote islands or mountain regions far from the coast. These survivors had tried to preserve their knowledge and rebuild their civilization, but they were too few in number, and lacked the resources to recreate the grand cities of their ancestors. Over generations, their advanced knowledge was gradually lost or forgotten. Their descendants became ordinary fishermen and farmers who remembered the old ways only in songs and stories passed down from parent to child. But some groups of survivors had been more successful than others in preserving the ancient knowledge. Dr. Novak found evidence that skilled Sea King engineers and architects had established small settlements in hidden valleys and remote islands, where they continued to practice their advanced construction techniques on a smaller scale. These settlements became the source of the mysterious stone structures that archaeologists had been finding in unlikely locations around the world. Perfectly fitted stone walls built with no mortar, massive blocks transported impossible distances, ancient observatories aligned with astronomical precision. All of these puzzling constructions could be explained as the work of Sea King survivors trying to rebuild their lost civilization. The implications of this discovery went far beyond archaeology and ancient history. If the Sea Kings had really possessed advanced maritime technology 8,000 years ago, then human civilization was much older and more sophisticated than anyone had previously believed. The survivors of the Great Waters might have influenced the development of all later civilizations, passing on fragments of their knowledge to the builders of the Egyptian pyramids, the stone circles of ancient Britain, and the mysterious statues of distant Pacific islands. The similarities between ancient construction techniques found on different continents might not be coincidences or examples of parallel development. They might be evidence of a shared heritage stretching back to the lost cities of the Sea Kings. Dr. Novak shared his findings with Dr. Stone, and together they began to develop a comprehensive theory about the rise and fall of the world's first maritime civilization. They proposed that the Sea Kings had achieved a level of technological and cultural development that wouldn't be matched again for thousands of years. Their cities had been centers of learning and innovation, where skilled craftsmen and scholars worked together to push the boundaries of human knowledge. They had developed advanced mathematics, astronomy, and engineering that allowed them to build structures that still amazed modern architects. They had created a global trading network that connected cultures from every continent, spreading knowledge and technology far beyond their own cities. But the Sea Kings had also made a fatal mistake. They had concentrated their entire civilization in coastal areas that were vulnerable to sudden changes in sea level. When the Great Waters came, they had no inland cities or mountain strongholds to fall back on. Their entire urban infrastructure was lost in a matter of days, along with most of their population and all of their accumulated knowledge. The few survivors scattered to remote corners of the world, carrying only fragments of the great learning that had once flourished in their submerged cities. This theory explained many of the mysteries that had puzzled archaeologists for decades. It accounted for the advanced construction techniques found at ancient sites around the world. It explained why so many different cultures had similar flood myths and legends. Most importantly, it provided a framework for understanding the underwater cities that were being discovered in increasing numbers as deep-sea exploration technology improved. Each new discovery added more pieces to the puzzle of the Sea Kings and their lost civilization. But the theory also raised disturbing questions about the future. If the Great Waters had come once before, destroying an entire civilization in just 3 days, could such a catastrophic event happen again? Dr. Novak's geological data showed that sea levels had fluctuated dramatically throughout Earth's history, sometimes rising or falling by hundreds of feet in relatively short periods of time. Modern coastal cities, built on the same vulnerable shorelines that had once hosted the Sea Kings' magnificent harbors, might be just as susceptible to sudden flooding as their ancient predecessors had been. The first major breakthrough in understanding the Sea Kings came in the autumn of 2003, when Dr. Pavel Novak received an urgent message from a deep-sea fishing captain named František Zerner, who worked the cold waters near Silver Rock Island. Captain Zerner had been fishing these waters for over 30 years and knew every underwater ridge and valley in the region. But on this particular morning, his sonar equipment was showing something that shouldn't have been there. A massive structure had appeared on the seafloor overnight, as if it had risen from the depths while the world slept. Captain Zerner was an experienced sailor who didn't believe in ghost stories or sea monsters, but what his instruments were telling him made no sense according to everything he knew about these familiar waters. The structure was enormous, stretching for over a mile across the ocean floor, and it was perfectly geometric in shape. clearly artificial rather than natural. But the strangest part was that Captain Zerner was certain this structure had not been there the day before, because he had fished this exact spot just 24 hours earlier, and his depth finder had shown nothing but empty sand and scattered rocks. Dr. Novak immediately organized an emergency expedition to investigate Captain Zerner's discovery, bringing along Dr. Marie Svobodova, a marine archaeologist who specialized in underwater photography, and Dr. Thomas Devoquet, an expert in ancient construction techniques. The research vessel Madra Valna reached Silver Rock Island 3 days later, and the team quickly confirmed that Captain Zerner's report was accurate. Their advanced sonar equipment revealed a massive stepped pyramid sitting on the seafloor at a depth of 250 feet, surrounded by what appeared to be a complex of smaller buildings and connecting pathways. The structure was so large that it would have been visible from the surface if the water had been clear. But the northern waters around Silver Rock Island were always dark and murky, filled with particles of sand and organic matter that blocked sunlight from penetrating more than a few feet below the surface. The first dive to examine the underwater pyramid was scheduled for dawn the following day. But the night before the expedition, something extraordinary happened that would change everything the researchers thought they knew about the site. Dr. Svobodova was on watch duty aboard the Madra Valna, monitoring the ship's instruments and keeping an eye on the weather conditions, when she noticed strange lights beginning to glow beneath the dark water. At first, she thought the lights might be from bioluminescent sea creatures, perhaps a school of deep-water fish that produced their own light to navigate in the darkness. But as she watched through the ship's powerful binoculars, she realized that these lights were too steady and too organized to be natural phenomena. The lights appeared to be coming from the underwater pyramid itself, glowing through the murky water like windows in a building that was somehow still occupied after thousands of years. Beneath the sea, Dr. Svobodova immediately woke the rest of the team, and together they watched in amazement as the entire pyramid began to pulse with a soft, blue-green light that seemed to come from within the stone walls themselves. The light was not bright enough to illuminate the surrounding water, but it was clearly visible as a gentle glow that outlined the massive structure's geometric shape. The smaller buildings around the pyramid also began to glow with the same mysterious light, creating a pattern that looked like a city map drawn in luminous lines against the black seafloor. The lights pulsed in a slow, rhythmic pattern that reminded Dr. Novak of a heartbeat, as if the ancient city was somehow alive and breathing in its underwater tomb. The light show continued for exactly 3 hours, from midnight until 3 in the morning, and then suddenly stopped as abruptly as it had begun. The pyramid and surrounding buildings returned to their normal dark state, invisible beneath the murky water, except for the faint outlines detected by the ship's sonar equipment. Dr. Svobodova had managed to record the entire event using the ship's underwater cameras, but when she reviewed the footage the next morning, she discovered that the recording equipment had somehow failed to capture the lights clearly. The cameras showed only faint, blurry glows that looked like equipment malfunctions, rather than the spectacular display that all 4 team members had witnessed with their own eyes. Despite the technical problems with the recording equipment, the team decided to proceed with their planned dive to examine the pyramid more closely. Dr. Devoquet and Dr. Svobodova descended in a specially equipped diving bell that would allow them to spend several hours exploring the structure while maintaining communication with the surface team. As their diving bell approached the pyramid through the dark water, both researchers were struck by the massive size of the construction and the precision of its stonework. Each level of the stepped pyramid was built from perfectly fitted blocks of dark stone, similar to the construction techniques found at other Sea King sites around the world. But unlike the other underwater cities that had been discovered, this pyramid showed no signs of damage from its time beneath the sea. The stone surfaces were clean and unmarked. The carved decorations were still sharp and clear, and there was no growth of sea plants or coral anywhere on the structure. As the diving bell moved closer to the pyramid's base, Dr. Svobodova noticed that the water around the structure was unusually clear, completely different from the murky conditions just a few hundred feet away. It was as if an invisible barrier surrounded the pyramid, keeping the normal sediment and organic matter of the deep ocean from settling on the ancient stones. The water near the pyramid was so clear that the researchers could see details of the construction that would have been impossible to observe in the normal underwater conditions of the area. They could make out individual tool marks on the stone blocks, intricate carvings of sea creatures and geometric patterns, and even what appeared to be written inscriptions in the same unknown script that had been found at other Sea King sites. But the most remarkable discovery came when Dr. DeVoe noticed that one section of the pyramid's base contained what appeared to be an entrance. A rectangular opening in the stone wall led into a dark corridor that disappeared into the heart of the massive structure. The entrance was perfectly preserved, with carved columns on either side and a stone lintel decorated with symbols that seemed to move and shift in the clear water, creating an optical illusion that made the ancient writing appear alive and dynamic. Dr. Svoboda wanted to explore the interior of the pyramid immediately, but Dr. DeVoe insisted that they needed more specialized equipment and additional safety precautions. Before attempting to enter an enclosed space deep underwater, the team spent the next 2 hours circling the pyramid in their diving bell, documenting the structure and taking hundreds of photographs that would be analyzed in detail back on the surface. They discovered that the pyramid was not a single isolated building, but part of a much larger complex that extended in all directions across the seafloor. Connected to the main pyramid by raised walkways and underground tunnels were dozens of smaller buildings, including what appeared to be residential areas, workshops, temples, and even what looked like a large harbor area where ancient ships might once have docked. The entire complex covered an area of several square miles, making it larger than most modern cities. During their exploration, both researchers began to experience strange sensations that they found difficult to describe. Dr. Svoboda reported feeling as if she was being watched by unseen eyes, while Dr. DeVoe described hearing faint sounds that seemed to come from inside the pyramid itself. Even though their diving bell's instruments detected no acoustic activity in the surrounding water, both researchers also noted that their diving equipment was behaving strangely near the pyramid, with compass needles spinning wildly and depth gauges giving inconsistent readings. The clear water around the structure seemed to have unusual properties that interfered with normal underwater equipment in ways that neither researcher had ever experienced before. As their exploration time came to an end and the diving bell began its ascent back to the surface, Dr. Svoboda looked back at the pyramid one last time and was startled to see what appeared to be a figure standing near the entrance they had discovered earlier. The figure was too distant and the water too deep to make out any details, but it appeared to be human in shape and was definitely moving rather than being carried by underwater currents. Dr. Svoboda quickly alerted Dr. DeVoe. At the time he looked back toward the pyramid, the figure had vanished. Neither researcher mentioned this sighting to the surface team immediately, but both would later admit that they had seen something near the pyramid that couldn't be explained by any normal underwater phenomena. Back aboard the Modrovelna, the team spent hours analyzing the photographs and data they had collected during the dive, but every answer they found only led to more questions about the mysterious pyramid and its impossible preservation beneath the sea. The structure clearly belonged to the same civilization that had built the other Sea King sites, but it was far more advanced and sophisticated than anything they had discovered before. The pyramid represented a level of engineering and architectural achievement that seemed to surpass even the most ambitious construction projects of the modern world. Yet it had been built thousands of years ago by a civilization that wasn't supposed to have existed. According to 3 weeks after the discovery of the pyramid near Silver Rock Island, Dr. Novak received a phone call that would change the direction of their entire investigation and lead them toward discoveries that challenged everything they thought they understood about the ancient world. The call came from Professor Helena Kratikvilova, director of the Institute of Ocean Studies at Crystal Bay University, who had been quietly monitoring underwater seismic activity around the world for the past 15 years. Professor Kratikvilova had noticed something extraordinary in her data that seemed to be connected to the team's work with the Sea King ruins. According to her sensitive earthquake detection equipment, underwater structures at 17 different locations around the globe had begun exhibiting synchronized patterns of minor seismic activity. These weren't natural earthquakes or geological shifts, but rather rhythmic pulses that seemed to be generated from within the ancient structures themselves, as if the ruins were somehow communicating with each other across thousands of miles of ocean. The timing of these seismic pulses was particularly intriguing, because they had begun exactly 24 hours before Captain Zerner first spotted the pyramid near Silver Rock Island. Professor Kratikvilova's data showed that underwater ruins near the Coral Islands off the coast of Western Island, beneath the temple reefs of the Southern Ocean, and at 14 other locations had all started producing the same slow, rhythmic vibrations at precisely the same moment. The pulses occurred every 6 hours and lasted for exactly 18 minutes, creating a pattern that was too regular and coordinated to be coincidental. Most remarkable of all, the seismic signatures from all 17 sites were perfectly synchronized, as if they were all part of some vast underwater network that was awakening after centuries of silence. Dr. Novak immediately shared this information with his team, and Dr. Suvodova realized that the timing matched exactly with the strange lights they had witnessed emanating from the Silver Rock Pyramid. The glowing phenomenon had begun at midnight and lasted for 3 hours, which corresponded perfectly with one of the seismic pulse cycles that Professor Kratochvilova had detected. This meant that the mysterious lights weren't an isolated event, but part of a worldwide pattern of activity involving ancient sea king structures that were somehow still functioning after thousands of years beneath the ocean. Armed with this new information, the team decided to return to Silver Rock Island for a more extensive investigation of the pyramid and its surrounding complex. But this time, they brought additional equipment and specialists to help them understand the full scope of what they were dealing with. Dr. Jan Kricic, an expert in underwater acoustics, joined the expedition along with his specialized listening equipment that could detect even the faintest sounds transmitted through water. Dr. Vera Horakova, a marine electronics engineer, brought sensitive instruments designed to measure electromagnetic fields and electrical activity in underwater environments. Most importantly, they convinced Professor Kratochvilova herself to join the expedition so she could monitor the seismic activity directly from the site. The expanded team arrived at Silver Rock Island during the 3rd week of October, when the northern waters were beginning to show the first signs of winter storms. The weather was challenging, with high winds and rough seas that made diving operations dangerous, but the team was determined to gather as much information as possible. Before the site became completely inaccessible during the harsh winter months, they anchored the research vessel Modra Velna directly over the pyramid and immediately began setting up their advanced monitoring equipment to record whatever phenomena might occur during the next scheduled seismic pulse cycle. As the midnight hour approached, Dr. Kric's acoustic equipment began detecting faint sounds coming from deep beneath the ship. The sounds were too low in frequency for human ears to hear without electronic amplification, but when played through the ship's speakers, they resembled a slow, deep humming that seemed to rise and fall in complex, harmonious patterns. Electromagnetic sensors started registering unusual energy readings that indicated powerful electrical currents were flowing through the pyramid's stone structure, creating magnetic fields strong enough to interfere with the ship's compass and navigation equipment. Professor Kratochvilova watched her seismic monitors with growing excitement as they showed that the pyramid was beginning to vibrate in the same synchronized pattern that she had detected at underwater sites around the world. At exactly midnight, the pyramid began to glow with the same mysterious light that Dr. Svobodova had witnessed during the first expedition. But this time the team was prepared to document the event properly. Multiple underwater cameras captured the spectacular sight of the entire complex illuminating the dark seafloor like a city of lights viewed from an airplane at night. The glow was not uniform across the structure, but instead moved in patterns that followed the ancient walkways and corridors, as if energy was flowing through predetermined pathways built into the pyramid's design. The smaller buildings around the main structure lit up in sequence, creating waves of light that radiated outward from the central pyramid like ripples on a calm pond. But the most extraordinary discovery came when Dr. Kric realized that the harmonic humming sounds were not random noise, but appeared to be following mathematical patterns that resembled a complex musical composition. The frequencies and rhythms were too sophisticated to be accidental, suggesting that the pyramid was somehow generating an elaborate acoustic signal that might be carrying encoded information. When Dr. Kric fed the acoustic data into computer analysis software, he discovered that the sound patterns contained repeating sequences that resembled the structure of language, as if the pyramid was trying to communicate something through its mysterious songs. During the 3-year light display, Dr. Horakova made readings that defied everything she thought she knew about underwater electrical phenomena. Her instruments detected energy levels that should have been impossible to generate or maintain in the saltwater environment surrounding the pyramid. The electrical currents flowing through the structure were not only incredibly powerful, but they were also perfectly stable and controlled, showing none of the random fluctuations that characterize natural electrical phenomena in seawater. Most puzzling of all, the energy seemed to be coming from within the pyramid itself, rather than being generated by any external source that her equipment could identify. As the team monitored the pyramid's activity throughout the night, they began to notice that their presence seemed to be affecting the ancient structure in unexpected ways. The light patterns became more complex and varied when the research vessel was positioned directly overhead, almost as if the pyramid was responding to their observations. Dr. Svobodova noticed that when she pointed the ship's most powerful underwater lights toward specific sections of the pyramid, those areas would glow more brightly in response, creating a primitive form of communication between the modern researchers and the ancient structure. The most unsettling moment of the expedition came near dawn, when Dr. Novak was reviewing the underwater camera footage from the night's observations. While examining close-up images of the pyramid's entrance, he noticed movement in the shadows near the carved doorway. At first, he thought it might be fish or other sea creatures attracted by the unusual light display, but careful frame-by-frame analysis revealed something far more disturbing. There appeared to be multiple figures moving within the pyramid's corridors, shapes that were clearly humanoid but seemed to glide through the water with unnatural ease and grace. Dr. Novak immediately called the rest of the team to examine the footage, and all 5 researchers agreed that the images showed what appeared to be people moving inside the ancient structure. The figures were too distant and the underwater lighting too dim to make out specific details, but their movements were purposeful and coordinated, suggesting intelligence and awareness of their environment. Most mysteriously, the figures seemed to be completely unaffected by the water, pressure and environmental conditions that would be fatal to any normal human at such depths. The implications of this discovery sent shockwaves through the team. If there were indeed people living inside the underwater pyramid, then the Sea King civilization might not be as extinct as everyone had assumed. Perhaps some descendants of the ancient builders had survived the great waters and continued to inhabit their submerged cities, adapting over thousands of years to life beneath the ocean. But this possibility raised even more questions about how such a society could have remained hidden from the modern world, and what their intentions might be toward the surface dwellers who had stumbled upon their secret underwater realm. As the Madra VLNA prepared to return to shore with their extraordinary findings, Professor Kratikvilova made one final check of her seismic monitoring equipment and discovered something that filled the entire team with a mixture of excitement and dread. The synchronized pulses from underwater sites around the world were not only continuing, but they were growing stronger and more frequent. What had begun as gentle vibrations occurring every 6 hours was now happening every 3 hours, with increasing intensity that suggested the ancient network was building toward some kind of climactic event that might occur in the very near future. The team returned to Crystal Bay University with their extraordinary footage and data. But before they could begin analyzing their discoveries properly, Professor Kratikvilova's monitoring stations around the world began detecting something that changed everything they thought they understood about the Sea King network. The synchronized pulses from underwater ruins were no longer occurring every 3 hours, but had accelerated to every 30 minutes, and the seismic intensity was increasing so rapidly that her most sensitive instruments were struggling to measure the full scope of the phenomenon. More alarming still, a global network of monitoring stations was detecting new underwater structures that were somehow revealing themselves for the first time in thousands of years. Sites that had shown no activity whatsoever for the entire 15 years of Professor Kratikvilova's research were suddenly appearing on her sensors, as if ancient ruins buried beneath layers of sediment and coral growth were awakening and making themselves known to the modern world. Dr. Novak immediately contacted research teams at universities around the globe, and the reports that came back painted a picture of worldwide underwater activity that defied all scientific explanation. Marine archaeologists working near the Coral Islands reported that Captain Goldbrook's ancient underwater city had begun glowing with the same mysterious light that the team had observed at Silver Rock Island. Deep-sea research vessels operating in the Southern Ocean detected massive structures rising from the seafloor near the Temple Reefs, structures that had never appeared on any previous sonar surveys of the area. Most disturbing of all, Fishing crews from 12 different countries reported encounters with strange lights moving beneath their boats, lights that followed their vessels for hours before disappearing into the depths of the ocean. Doctors realized that they needed to return to Silver Rock Island immediately to document whatever was happening at the pyramid site. But when she tried to contact Captain Zerner to arrange transportation, she discovered that the experienced fisherman had not returned from his last voyage to the area. His fishing boat had been found drifting empty near the Silver Rock waters, with all of its equipment intact and functioning normally, but with no sign of Captain Zerner or his crew anywhere aboard the vessel. The boat's logbook contained entries right up until the day of his disappearance, but the final entry consisted only of a single line written in handwriting that didn't match Captain Zerner's usual careful script. The mysterious entry simply read, "They are calling us home to the deep places where the first waters flow." Despite the concerning disappearance of Captain Zerner, Dr. Novak insisted that the team had to return to Silver Rock Island to investigate the escalating activity at the pyramid site. Professor Kratikvilova's data showed that the seismic pulses from the Silver Rock location were now stronger than those coming from any other underwater site around the world, suggesting that the pyramid was serving as some kind of central hub in the ancient network. The team chartered a larger research vessel, the St. Baran H. Bazda, and recruited additional specialists including Dr. Miroslav Isha, an expert in ancient languages and symbols, and Dr. Alena Asner, a marine biologist who specialized in deep-water life forms that existed in extreme underwater environments. The journey to Silver Rock Island took place during the first week of November, when the northern seas were at their most dangerous and unpredictable. Storm systems moved across the water with little warning, and the temperature had dropped so low that ice was beginning to form on the ship's equipment. But as the St. Baran H. Bazda approached the coordinates where the pyramid lay hidden beneath the waves, the crew noticed that the water around Silver Rock Island was behaving in ways that contradicted everything they knew about ocean currents and weather patterns in the region. The normally rough seas became completely calm within a 5-mile radius of the island, as if some invisible force was controlling the wind and waves to create a perfect circle of tranquil water around the ancient site. Even more remarkable was the discovery that the water temperature near the pyramid had increased dramatically since their last visit. Dr. Asner's instruments detected thermal readings that indicated the water around the structure was now almost 20 degrees warmer than the surrounding ocean, creating a microclimate that was attracting marine life from hundreds of miles away. Schools of tropical fish that had no business swimming in the cold northern waters were gathering around the pyramid in massive numbers, and Dr. Asner observed species of deep-sea creatures that were normally found only in the deepest ocean. Trenches thousands of miles from Silver Rock Island. As the St. Baran H. Bazda anchored over the pyramid site, Dr. Ihar began examining the photographs and video footage that the team had collected during their previous expeditions, paying particular attention to the carved symbols and inscriptions that decorated the ancient structure. Using computer analysis and comparison databases containing thousands of examples of ancient writing systems from around the world, Dr. Ihar made a breakthrough that sent shockwaves through the entire team. The symbols carved on the Silver Rock Pyramid were not just decorative patterns or religious markings, but appeared to be a sophisticated form of writing that contained detailed technical information about the pyramid's construction and purpose. According to Dr. Ihar's translation work, the inscriptions described the pyramid as a beacon of the deep waters that was designed to communicate with other Sea King structures across the world's oceans. The symbols indicated that the pyramid contained what the ancient builders called a heart of living stone that could generate the electrical and acoustic signals that modern researchers had been detecting. Most intriguingly, the inscriptions suggested that the pyramid was not just a communication device, but also served as a gateway or portal that allowed travel between different underwater cities without having to make the dangerous journey across the open ocean. As the team prepared for their most ambitious dive yet, planning to enter the pyramid's interior and examine the mysterious heart of living stone that the inscriptions described, Dr. Asner made a discovery that forced them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the site. While analyzing water samples from around the pyramid, she found microscopic organisms that appeared to be unlike any known form of marine life on Earth. These organisms exhibited properties that seemed to blur the line between living tissue and advanced technology. suggesting that the Sea Kings had somehow developed biological engineering techniques that allowed them to create hybrid life forms that could serve specific functions in their underwater cities. The most extraordinary characteristic of these microscopic organisms was their apparent ability to process and transmit information, almost like biological computers that could communicate with each other across vast distances. Dr. G. Astner's research suggested that these organisms might be the true source of the synchronized activity that Professor Kratikvilova had been detecting at underwater sites around the world. The Sea Kings had apparently created a living network of biological communication devices that could remain active for thousands of years, continuing to function long after their creators had disappeared from the surface of the Earth. As the team made final preparations for their descent into the pyramid's interior, they received an urgent message from Professor Kratikvilova back at Crystal Bay University. Her monitoring stations had detected a massive surge in seismic activity from underwater sites around the globe, and the synchronized pulses were now occurring every 5 minutes with an intensity that was registering on earthquake detection, equipment normally used to monitor major geological events. Most alarming of all, several of her monitoring stations had detected what appeared to be large objects moving through the deep ocean at speeds that far exceeded anything that current underwater technology could achieve. The implications of Professor Kratikvilova's latest data were staggering and deeply unsettling. If large underwater vessels were indeed moving between the ancient Sea King sites, then the civilization that had built the pyramid network was not only still active, but possessed transportation technology that was far more advanced than anything the modern world had developed. The team found themselves facing the possibility that their investigation had attracted the attention of beings who had been living hidden in the depths of the ocean for thousands of years, and who might not welcome the intrusion of surface dwellers into their carefully guarded underwater realm. As Dr. Novak and Dr. Svobodova prepared to descend into the pyramid in their diving bell, strange lights began appearing all around the St. Beer and Hvazda, not just from the pyramid below, but from the surrounding water as well. These lights moved in formation like a fleet of underwater vehicles, circling the research vessel in patterns that seemed both curious and cautionary. The crew watched in stunned silence as the lights performed an elaborate display that appeared to be some form of communication, pulsing in changing colors and sequences that suggested intelligence and purpose behind their movements. Dr. Iha frantically tried to decode the light patterns using his knowledge of the Sea King symbol system, and he believed he could make out what appeared to be a message being transmitted through the colored flashes and movement formations. According to his preliminary translation, the lights seemed to be conveying a warning about the dangers of entering the pyramid, combined with what appeared to be an invitation to communicate through methods that would not require physical intrusion into the sacred spaces of the underwater city. While Dr. Novak's team prepared for their crucial descent into the Silver Rock Pyramid, similar extraordinary events were unfolding at underwater sites around the world, creating a global pattern of activity that suggested the Sea King civilization was emerging from its long slumber in coordinated fashion. Dr. Alina, a marine archaeologist working near the sunken ruins off Thunder Cape in the Eastern Ocean, had been monitoring the ancient site for 3 years without detecting any unusual activity until the night that Professor Kratikvilova's sensors first registered the synchronized pulses. Dr. Prohaskova's research station was equipped with basic underwater cameras that had been recording the seafloor continuously, and when she reviewed the footage from that crucial night, she discovered that the Thunder Cape ruins had undergone a transformation that defied all logical explanation. The ancient stone structures that had been covered with centuries of coral growth and marine sediment were now completely clean and exposed, as if invisible hands had carefully removed every trace of accumulated debris during the hours of darkness. More remarkably, sections of the ruins that had been damaged by underwater earthquakes and erosion were now perfectly restored, with missing stones replaced and broken walls rebuilt to their original specifications. Dr. Prauskova's cameras had been recording throughout the entire night, but the footage showed only swirling clouds of sediment and occasional flashes of the same mysterious lights that other research teams were reporting at Sea King sites around the globe. The restoration of the Thunder Cape ruins was not an isolated incident, and reports of similar phenomena began arriving from underwater archaeological sites on every continent. Dr. Carol Vartan, who had spent 5 years studying a partially buried Sea King harbor complex near Moon Bay in the Southern Ocean, arrived at his research site to find that the ancient docking structures had somehow been raised from the seafloor and were now clearly visible through the clear blue water. The massive stone pillars that supported the ancient piers showed no signs of the damage that Dr. Novat had carefully documented in his previous surveys, and the intricate carvings that decorated the harbor entrance were now as sharp and detailed as if they had been completed yesterday rather than thousands of years ago. Even more puzzling was the discovery that these restored underwater cities were not empty ruins, but seemed to be showing signs of current habitation and use. Dr. Zuzana Svobodova, a marine biologist studying sea life around the Coral Islands, reported finding fresh tool marks on some of the ancient stone blocks, along with what appeared to be recently harvested seaweed gardens arranged in neat rows between the restored buildings. Her underwater cameras captured images of carved stone vessels that contained what looked like fresh water, somehow preserved in containers that should have been flooded with salt water within hours of being placed on the sea floor. The most significant development came from Dr. Petr, an oceanographer who had been tracking unusual acoustic signals in the deep waters near Crystal Ridge, an underwater mountain range that was located exactly halfway between the Silver Rock Pyramid and the ancient harbor complex at Moon Bay. Dr. Mares had been monitoring these waters for unusual whale migration patterns when his sensitive listening equipment began detecting artificial sounds that clearly originated from intelligent sources rather than natural marine phenomena. The sounds followed complex mathematical patterns that resembled the harmonic sequences that Dr. Cridge had recorded at Silver Rock Island. But these signals were much more elaborate and seemed to carry vast amounts of encoded information. Using advanced computer analysis, Dr. Mares determined that the Crystal Ridge signals were actually communications being transmitted between the Silver Rock Pyramid and the Moon Bay Harbor Complex, creating an underwater information network that spanned thousands of miles of open ocean. The signals traveled through the water at speeds that exceeded anything that modern acoustic technology could achieve, suggesting that the Sea Kings had developed communication methods that utilized principles of underwater sound transmission that were completely unknown to contemporary science. Most remarkably, the signal strength remained constant, regardless of distance, indicating that the ancient network could maintain perfect communication clarity across any distance within the world's oceans. As news of these discoveries spread through the international archaeological community, a pattern began to emerge that revealed the true scope of the Sea King civilization's underwater infrastructure. Dr. Anna Kratikvilova, Professor Kratikvilov, daughter and a specialist in ancient urban planning, began mapping the locations of all known Sea King sites and discovered that they were arranged in a precise geometric pattern that covered the entire globe. The underwater cities were not randomly scattered across the ocean floors, but were positioned at specific intervals that created a network of interconnected settlements capable of supporting trade, communication, and travel between any 2 points on Earth. Dr. Anna Kratikvilova's analysis revealed that the Sea Kings had divided the world's oceans into manageable regions, with major cities serving as regional centers that coordinated activities across their designated areas. The Silver Rock Pyramid appeared to be the primary communication hub for the northern regions, while the Moon Bay Harbor Complex served a similar function for the southern waters. Smaller settlements and outposts were positioned at regular intervals along the major ocean routes, creating a transportation and supply network that would have allowed the Sea Kings to maintain their global civilization even during periods of severe weather or natural disasters. But the most intriguing aspect of Dr. Anna Kratikvilova's research was her discovery that the Sea King network included not only underwater cities, but also coastal settlements and island bases that had been deliberately hidden from civilizations. Using historical records and archaeological evidence, she identified dozens of locations around the world where Sea King outposts had been disguised as natural rock formations or hidden within coastal cave systems. These secret bases would have allowed the Sea Kings to monitor and interact with surface civilizations while maintaining the secrecy of their underwater realm. One of the most significant of these hidden bases was discovered by Dr. Toma Huka, a cave explorer and archaeologist who had been investigating a complex system of sea caves near Golden Point on the western coast. Dr. Husker had been mapping these caves for 2 years when he discovered a chamber that contained clear evidence of Sea King occupation. The chamber was located 50 feet below sea level, but was filled with fresh air rather than seawater, somehow maintained at normal atmospheric pressure, despite being connected to the ocean through multiple underwater passages. Inside the Golden Point chamber, Dr. Husker found elaborate carved walls decorated with the same symbols that Dr. Iha had been studying at Silver Rock Island, along with what appeared to be a complete library of stone tablets containing thousands of inscriptions in the Sea King script. But the most remarkable discovery was a collection of perfectly preserved artifacts that demonstrated the Sea King's advanced knowledge of materials science and engineering. Dr. Husker found tools made from unknown metal alloys that showed no signs of corrosion despite thousands of years in the humid cave environment, along with glass objects that were harder than diamond, yet flexible enough to bend without breaking. The Golden Point chamber also contained what appeared to be a detailed map room, with carved stone charts that showed ocean currents, wind patterns, and underwater topography with an accuracy that exceeded the best modern nautical charts. These maps revealed that the Sea Kings had possessed intimate knowledge of oceanographic conditions throughout the world's seas, including information about deep water currents and thermal layers that contemporary marine scientists were only beginning to understand. Most importantly, the maps showed the locations of hundreds of Sea King settlements that had never been discovered by modern archaeologists, suggesting that the true extent of their underwater civilization was far greater than anyone had previously imagined. Dr. Husker's exploration of the Golden Point chamber was interrupted when he began experiencing the same strange phenomena that other researchers had reported at Sea King sites around the world. His equipment started malfunctioning in ways that suggested the presence of powerful electromagnetic fields, and he began hearing faint sounds that seemed to come from deep within the cave system. Most unsettling of all, Dr. Husker reported seeing lights moving through the underwater passages that connected the chamber to the open ocean. Lights that appeared to be approaching his location with purposeful intent. As these discoveries accumulated from research teams around the globe, it became clear that the awakening of the Sea King network was not a random occurrence, but a coordinated response to some specific trigger that had activated dormant systems. Throughout their underwater civilization, Dr. Vaclav Devoke, a specialist in ancient technologies who had joined the international research effort, proposed that the Sea Kings had built their network with sophisticated automatic systems that could detect changes in ocean conditions, seismic activity, or even the presence of advanced surface civilizations that might pose a threat to their hidden realm. According to Dr. Devoke's theory, the Sea King network had been monitoring the world's oceans for thousands of years, waiting for conditions that would require them to emerge from their concealment and take active measures to protect their underwater cities. The increased exploration of deep-sea environments by modern research vessels, combined with the growing impact of surface civilization on ocean ecosystems, might have triggered ancient warning systems that were now activating response protocols that had been dormant since the time of the Great Waters. As reports of the extraordinary Sea King discoveries spread throughout the global scientific community, not everyone was convinced that the researchers had found evidence of an ancient underwater civilization that was somehow still active. After thousands of years beneath the waves, Dr. Martin Zerner, a respected marine geologist from Harvard University who was not related to the missing fishing captain, published a detailed analysis suggesting that all of the phenomena being reported could be explained by perfectly natural geological processes that the research teams were misinterpreting due to their excitement about finding underwater ruins. According to Dr. Martin Zerner's theory, the synchronized seismic activity that Professor Kratikvilova was detecting was actually the result of a chain reaction of underwater earthquakes triggered by shifting tectonic plates beneath the ocean floor, and the restoration of damaged ruins was simply the result of sediment being redistributed by these same seismic events. Dr. Martin Zerner argued that the research teams were seeing patterns and intelligence where none actually existed, a psychological phenomenon known as confirmation bias that often affected scientists who were too emotionally invested in their discoveries to maintain proper objectivity. He pointed out that the acoustic signals being detected by Dr. Mares and Dr. Cridge could easily be explained as the sounds of underwater landslides, volcanic activity, or the movement of large schools of whales that were responding to changes in water temperature and current patterns caused by the increased seismic activity. The mysterious lights that multiple research teams had reported could be bioluminescent organisms that were being disturbed by the underwater earthquakes, or electrical phenomena created by the friction of moving sediment and rock. Even more skeptical was Dr. Jiris Svoboda, a specialist in underwater archaeology who had spent 20 years investigating shipwrecks and ancient harbor sites, without ever encountering anything that suggested the existence of advanced prehistoric civilizations. Dr. Svoboda published a series of articles questioning the authenticity of the Sea King sites, suggesting that the perfectly fitted stonework and advanced construction techniques were actually evidence of much more recent construction that had been deliberately disguised to appear ancient. According to his theory, the underwater cities were elaborate hoaxes created by unknown groups for purposes that might range from tourism, promotion to international political manipulation. Dr. Svoboda argued that modern construction, equipment and underwater welding technology could easily create the type of precise stonework that the research teams were attributing to ancient Sea King builders, and that artificial aging techniques could make new construction appear to be thousands of years old. He suggested that the timing of the discoveries was suspicious, occurring just as several countries were negotiating new agreements about underwater mining rights and territorial claims in international waters. The Sea King sites might be part of a sophisticated deception designed to establish historical claims to valuable underwater resources, or to create protected archaeological zones that would prevent competitors from accessing strategic ocean locations. But perhaps the most disturbing alternative explanation came from Dr. Bezina, a psychologist who specialized in group behavior and mass hysteria phenomena. Dr. Novakova proposed that the Sea King discoveries were actually an example of collective delusion spreading through the international research community, similar to historical cases where entire groups of people became convinced they were experiencing supernatural phenomena that later proved to be imaginary. According to her analysis, the stress and isolation of deep-sea research work made marine archaeologists particularly susceptible to shared hallucinations and misinterpretation of sensory data. Dr. Novakova pointed out that many of the most dramatic Sea King encounters had occurred during night shifts, when researchers were tired and working in the disorienting environment of complete darkness that characterized deep underwater exploration. She suggested that the acoustic and visual phenomena being reported might be the result of equipment malfunctions that were being misinterpreted by researchers who were already primed to expect mysterious discoveries. The missing Captain Franz Zerner could have been the victim of an ordinary maritime accident that had been given sinister significance by researchers who were looking for evidence to support their theories about active Sea King settlements. However, Dr. Novakova's psychological explanation was strongly challenged by Dr. Rudolf Kratikvel, a specialist in cognitive psychology, who argued that the consistency and technical precision of the reports from different research teams made mass hallucination extremely unlikely. Dr. Kratikvel noted that the researchers were using sophisticated recording equipment that had captured objective data supporting their claims, and that the synchronized seismic activity detected by Professor Kratikvilova's monitoring stations provided independent verification that something unusual was indeed happening at underwater sites around the world. He also pointed out that the mathematical precision of the acoustic signals being detected suggested an artificial origin that could not be explained by natural phenomena or psychological factors. Adding another layer of complexity to the debate was Dr. Stanislav Dvorak, a historian who specialized in ancient maritime cultures and had spent years studying the historical records that Captain Blackwater had collected. Dr. Stanislav Dvok argued that the Sea King discoveries were genuine archaeological finds, but that the research teams were dramatically overestimating the technological capabilities of the ancient builders. According to his interpretation, the Sea Kings were simply a skilled prehistoric trading civilization that had built coastal settlements using advanced but perfectly achievable construction techniques, and these settlements had been submerged by gradual sea level changes over thousands of years. Dr. Stanislav Dvok suggested that the apparent preservation and restoration of the underwater ruins could be explained by unique chemical conditions in certain underwater environments that prevented normal decay processes, while the lights and acoustic phenomena were natural results of bioluminescent organisms and underwater acoustic effects that the ancient sea kings had deliberately incorporated into their architectural designs. He proposed that the sea kings had been sophisticated engineers who understood how to create buildings that would produce interesting visual and audio effects when submerged, perhaps as part of religious or ceremonial practices that honored ocean deities. But the most intriguing alternative perspective came from Dr. Vera Horakova, a marine biologist who had been studying the unusual organisms that Dr. Asner had discovered around the Silver Rock Pyramid. Dr. Horakova proposed that the Sea King sites were not built by an ancient human civilization at all, but were, actually, the creation of an unknown species of intelligent marine life that had evolved sophisticated construction abilities over millions of years of underwater development. According to her theory, these creatures had learned to manipulate stone and metal in ways that produced structures resembling human architecture, but their construction methods were based on biological processes rather than mechanical technology. Dr. Horakova argued that the microscopic organisms found around the Sea King sites were not ancient biotechnology created by human builders, but were actually the tools used by this intelligent marine species to construct and maintain their underwater cities. The synchronized activity being detected at sites around the world might represent communication and coordination between different colonies of these creatures, who were responding to changes in ocean conditions that threatened their long-established territories. The apparent restoration of damaged ruins could be ongoing maintenance work performed by these marine engineers, who possessed abilities that allowed them to repair and rebuild their structures using methods that were completely alien to human understanding. This biological explanation gained some support from Dr. Alois, a specialist in marine evolution who noted that several species of sea creatures already demonstrated remarkable construction abilities, including corals that built massive reef structures and certain species of fish that created elaborate nests and territorial markers. Dr. Svoboda suggested that given millions of years of evolution in the stable underwater environment, it was entirely possible that some marine species could have developed intelligence and construction abilities that far exceeded anything found in terrestrial animals. However, the biological theory was challenged by Dr. František Novak, a linguist who had been working with Dr. Iha to decode the Sea King inscriptions found at various underwater sites. Dr. František Novak argued that the complexity and mathematical sophistication of the Sea King writing system indicated a level of abstract thinking that was characteristic of human intelligence, rather than the instinctive behaviors typically displayed by marine animals. The inscriptions contained references to concepts like time measurement, astronomical observations, and philosophical ideas that suggested that Sea Kings possessed cultural and intellectual development that paralleled or exceeded that of known human civilizations. As the debate over the true nature of the Sea King discoveries continued to intensify, new evidence emerged that seemed to support different aspects of each competing theory. Some researchers reported finding artifacts that appeared to be genuine ancient human tools and artwork, while others discovered biological specimens that defied classification according to any known taxonomic categories. The acoustic signals being detected at underwater sites showed characteristics that were consistent with both artificial communication systems and natural biological processes, making it impossible to determine definitively whether they originated from technology or living organisms. The growing controversy surrounding the Sea King discoveries attracted the attention of government agencies and military organizations around the world, who were concerned about the potential implications of the research findings for national security and territorial sovereignty. Several countries quietly began deploying naval vessels to monitor underwater sites within their territorial waters, while international organizations called for coordinated scientific investigation to determine the truth behind the increasingly mysterious and contradictory reports coming from marine research teams around the globe. As the world watched and waited for answers about the true nature of the underwater discoveries, something deeper and more profound was happening that went beyond the scientific debates and competing theories about who or what had built the mysterious Sea King cities. The very existence of these ancient ruins beneath the waves was forcing humanity to confront fundamental questions about our place in the world and our relationship with the vast oceans that cover most of our planet. For thousands of years, people had looked out at the endless blue waters and imagined them as empty wilderness. a barrier between the known lands, rather than a realm that might hold its own civilizations and secrets. The Sea King discoveries were changing that perspective forever, revealing that the ocean depths might contain entire worlds of knowledge and culture that had remained hidden from surface dwellers since the beginning of recorded history. Dr. Helena Novotná, a philosopher of science who had been following the Sea King research with growing fascination, wrote extensively about the psychological impact that these discoveries were having on people around the world. According to Dr. Novotná, the underwater cities represented something that human beings had always both feared and hoped for in their deepest hearts. They were evidence that we were not alone on Earth, that other forms of intelligence and civilization existed beyond our limited understanding of what was possible. But they also represented the humbling realization that despite all of our modern technology and scientific knowledge, vast areas of our own planet remained completely unknown to us, filled with mysteries that challenged everything we thought we understood about the history of life on Earth. The emotional response to the Sea King discoveries was particularly strong among people who made their living from the sea. Fishermen, sailors, and coastal communities around the world reported feeling a mixture of wonder and unease as they realized that their daily work took them over vast underwater realms that might be inhabited by beings whose existence had never been suspected. Captain Marie Sivobodova, an experienced fishing boat captain who worked the waters near Crystal Bay, described the strange feeling of sailing over areas where Sea King ruins had been discovered. Knowing that hundreds of feet below her boat lay cities and temples built by unknown hands thousands of years ago, Captain Suvadova spoke about how the Sea King discoveries had changed the way she looked at the ocean during her long voyages. Where once she had seen empty water stretching to the horizon, she now imagined the possibility of lights moving through underwater streets, of ancient beings going about their daily lives in cities that had been built when her own ancestors were living in simple villages on the distant shore. The ocean had become a place of infinite mystery rather than familiar territory, and Captain Svobodova found herself wondering whether the strange currents and weather patterns that every sailor learned to respect might actually be signs of activity in the hidden cities far below the surface. The psychological impact of the Sea King discoveries extended far beyond maritime communities to touch people in all walks of life who had never given much thought to what might exist beneath the ocean waves. Dr. Toma Novak, a psychiatrist who specialized in treating anxiety disorders, reported a significant increase in patients who were experiencing what he called oceanic vertigo, a form of existential anxiety triggered by the realization that most of the Earth's surface was covered by water that contained unknown depths and possibly unknown forms of life. These patients described feeling overwhelmed by the vastness of the Pansian underwater world and disturbed by the possibility that human civilization might be much smaller and less significant than they had previously believed. But the Sea King discoveries also inspired feelings of wonder and possibility that touched something deep in the human imagination. Children around the world began drawing pictures of underwater cities and imagining what it would be like to visit the ancient ruins and meet the mysterious beings who might still inhabit them. Teachers reported that students were asking more questions about ocean exploration and marine biology, inspired by the possibility that there were still great discoveries to be made in the world's waters. The underwater cities represented adventure and mystery in an age when many young people felt that all the exciting places on Earth had already been explored and mapped. Dr. Pavel Svoboda, a cultural anthropologist who studied how societies respond to paradigm-shifting discoveries, noted that the Sea King findings were having effects similar to other historical moments when human beings were forced to dramatically expand their understanding of the world. The discovery that the Earth was round rather than flat, the realization that other planets existed beyond our solar system, and the development of theories about evolution and deep time had all required people to fundamentally reconsider their place in the universe. The Sea King cities were having a similar impact, forcing humanity to acknowledge that our planet contained realms of existence that had remained completely hidden despite thousands of years of maritime exploration and technological development. The religious and spiritual implications of the Sea King discoveries were particularly profound and complex. Many people found comfort in the idea that the underwater cities might represent evidence of divine creation that was more vast and mysterious than any human religion had previously imagined. If intelligent beings had been building sophisticated civilizations thousands of years before recorded history, then perhaps the world contained levels of meaning and purpose that went far beyond human understanding. Some religious leaders interpreted the Sea King discoveries as confirmation that creation was more wonderful and complex than their faiths had taught, while others worried that the findings challenged fundamental beliefs about humanity's special role in the world. Dr. Anna Kratochvilova found herself thinking often about the philosophical implications of her research into the global network of Sea King settlements. If the underwater cities really were connected by sophisticated communication systems that had remained active for thousands of years, then they represented a form of civilization that had achieved something that modern humanity had only begun to attempt. With radio, television, and computer networks, the Sea Kings had apparently created a stable, sustainable global society that had survived catastrophic changes in sea level and climate, maintaining its cultural and technological achievements across vast spans of time that dwarfed the entire history of recorded human civilization. The possibility that such an advanced civilization had existed and might still exist in the ocean depths raised uncomfortable questions about the path that surface-dwelling humanity had chosen for its own development. Modern human society was increasingly dependent on technologies that consumed vast amounts of energy and resources, creating pollution and environmental damage that threatened the stability of global ecosystems. The Sea Kings, by contrast, seemed to have developed technologies that worked in harmony with natural ocean processes, creating cities that had remained pristine and functional for thousands of years without depleting or destroying their underwater environment. Dr. Dvok spent many sleepless nights considering the implications of his theory that the Sea King network contained automatic monitoring systems that had been watching surface civilization for centuries. If such systems really existed, then every major development in human history had been observed and recorded by intelligence that remained hidden beneath the waves. The rise and fall of empires, the development of agriculture and industry, the exploration of the world's continents, and the recent expansion into space exploration had all taken place under the watchful observation of beings whose own civilization was far older and possibly far more advanced than anything humanity had achieved. The idea that humanity was being observed by hidden intelligence was both thrilling and deeply unsettling. It suggested that surface-dwelling civilization might be only one part of a much larger story that included forms of life and culture that had remained completely unknown to human science and history. But it also raised questions about why the Sea Kings had chosen to remain hidden, and whether their recent awakening represented a response to changes in surface civilization that they found concerning or threatening. Dr. Elena Prohoska often found herself standing on the deck of her research vessel at night, looking out over the dark waters and wondering what thoughts and feelings might be passing through minds that existed in the cities far below. Were the Sea Kings curious about the surface world that had developed above their hidden realm? Did they feel protective of the ocean environment that had sheltered their civilization for so many centuries? Or were they simply indifferent to surface-dwelling humanity, continuing their own ancient way of life without concern for the brief existence of civilizations that lived and died in the thin layer of air above the sea? The most profound impact of the Sea King discoveries was the way they expanded the human sense of time and possibility. The underwater cities represented achievements that had endured for thousands of years, suggesting that civilization could be built to last far longer than the brief centuries that characterized most human societies. They also demonstrated that intelligence and culture could develop in forms and environments that were completely different from surface-dwelling human experience, opening up infinite possibilities for what might exist elsewhere in the vast universe beyond Earth. In the end, Dr. Novak's team never did enter the interior of the Silver Rock Pyramid, and perhaps that was exactly as it should have been. As the St. Björn Ishvazda sat anchored over the glowing underwater city on that cold November night, surrounded by the dancing lights that seemed to be trying to communicate with the surface world, the researchers made a decision that would define how humanity would approach the Sea King mystery for generations to come. Instead of forcing their way into the ancient structure with diving equipment and cameras, they chose to listen and observe, to show respect for a civilization that had clearly survived in the depths for thousands of years without interference. From the surface world, Dr. Swobodova later described the moment when they turned off their powerful underwater lights and simply watched the gentle glow emanating from the pyramid as one of the most peaceful and profound experiences of her entire career, a reminder that some mysteries were more beautiful when left partially unexplored. The synchronized pulses from Sea King sites around the world gradually decreased in frequency over the following months, returning to the gentle 6-hour rhythm that Professor Kratik-Villava had first detected, as if the ancient network had completed whatever communication or coordination process had been triggered by the initial discovery. The underwater cities remained active and clearly inhabited, but they seemed to have established a peaceful coexistence with the surface world that acknowledged the presence of both civilizations without requiring direct contact between them. Fishing boats continued to work the waters above Sea King settlements, but captains reported that their equipment worked more smoothly and their catches were more abundant in areas where the underwater cities maintained their gentle influence on local ocean conditions. Dr. Isha eventually succeeded in translating significant portions of the Sea King inscriptions, and his work revealed a philosophy that emphasized harmony between different forms of life and the importance of protecting the ocean environment for future generations. The ancient texts spoke of surface dwellers and deep dwellers as two branches of the same family tree, destined to share the world's waters while following different paths of development and understanding. The Sea Kings had apparently always known about surface civilizations, and their recent awakening had been motivated not by hostility or fear, but by a desire to ensure that the increasing activity of surface technology did not damage the delicate balance of ocean ecosystems that supported both realms. The missing captain František Zerner was never found, but his empty fishing boat was discovered several months later in a remote cove near Golden Point, carefully anchored and perfectly maintained despite having drifted unmanned for many weeks. Inside the boat's cabin, investigators found a handwritten journal that Captain Zerner had apparently kept during his final voyage, describing his gradual realization that the sea was far more alive and aware than he had ever imagined. The journal's final entries spoke of strange dreams in which he felt called to join an ancient community that had been waiting beneath the waves for someone who truly understood the ocean's deepest rhythms and secrets. The journal ended with a simple statement that Captain Zerner had found his true home in the deep places where the first waters still flowed with the wisdom of the world's beginning. Dr. Toma Huska continued his exploration of the Golden Point cave system, but he approached his work with a new sense of reverence and caution after his encounters with the mysterious lights and sounds that seemed to guard the Sea King chamber. He established a small research station near the cave entrance where he could monitor the ancient site without disturbing whatever processes were taking place in the deeper chambers. And over time, he began to notice that the cave system was somehow responding to his respectful presence by revealing new passages and artifacts that had previously remained hidden. Dr. Hutska learned to work with the rhythm of the tides and the phases of the moon, following patterns that seemed to unlock different aspects of the Sea King legacy at different times. The international debate about the nature and significance of the Sea King discoveries gradually evolved into a broader conversation about humanity's relationship with the ocean and the possibility that intelligence and civilization could take forms that were completely different from surface-dwelling human society. Marine research programs around the world began incorporating protocols for respectful interaction with unknown underwater phenomena, acknowledging that the depths might contain forms of life and culture that deserved the same consideration that would be extended to any newly discovered human civilization. Dr. Anna Kratik-Villava's mapping project revealed that the Sea King network included nearly 300 underwater settlements scattered across all of the world's major ocean basins, creating a global civilization that had maintained its cultural unity and technological sophistication for far longer than any surface society had ever achieved. But rather than attempting to explore or document all of these sites, the international research community established guidelines that limited investigation to passive observation and respectful study that would not interfere with whatever activities were taking place in the underwater cities. The Sea King discoveries fundamentally changed how people thought about the ocean, transforming it from a vast empty wilderness into a realm that might be home to ancient wisdom and forms of beauty that surface dwellers were only beginning to appreciate. Sailors reported that their voyages felt different when they sailed over areas where Sea King cities were known to exist. as if the water itself carried a sense of peace and protection that made even the most dangerous storms feel manageable. Children who grew up hearing stories of the underwater cities developed a natural respect for marine environments and a sense of wonder about the mysteries that might exist in places that human technology could reach, but human understanding could not fully grasp. Professor Kratikviliva continued monitoring the Sea King network for the rest of her career, maintaining her global array of seismic sensors that tracked the gentle pulses flowing between underwater cities like the heartbeat of a vast living system that encompassed the entire planet. Her data showed that the ancient communication network remained active and stable, carrying information and coordination signals that maintained the harmony of a civilization that had learned to live in perfect balance with the ocean's natural rhythms. The pulse patterns occasionally changed in response to major storms, underwater earthquakes, or other significant events in the marine environment, suggesting that the Sea King cities served as a kind of global nervous system that helped maintain the stability of ocean ecosystems around the world. Dr. Pavel Novak eventually retired from active underwater archaeology, but he continued to study the philosophical implications of the Sea King discoveries and their message about the possibility of sustainable civilization that could endure for thousands of years without depleting or destroying its environment. He established a research foundation dedicated to learning from the Sea King example, studying how their technologies and social systems had achieved such remarkable stability and longevity. Dr. Novak's later writings emphasized that the most important lesson from the underwater cities was not their advanced engineering or sophisticated communication networks, but their demonstration that intelligence and civilization could develop in forms that enhanced rather than threatened the natural world. As the years passed, the Sea King cities became a source of quiet inspiration for people around the world who were looking for examples of how human society might evolve to become more sustainable and harmonious with natural systems. The underwater civilization served as proof that it was possible to build cities and technologies that could last for thousands of years while actually improving the health of their environment rather than destroying it. The gentle lights that occasionally emanated from the depths became symbols of hope and possibility, reminders that even in a world that often seemed chaotic and uncertain, there were places where ancient wisdom continued to flow, like deep ocean currents that had been carrying the same pure water since the beginning of time. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you might imagine yourself floating peacefully above one of these underwater cities, watching the gentle lights moving through ancient streets like slow dancing stars reflected in dark water. The Sea Kings continue their timeless work in the depths, maintaining the balance that keeps our oceans healthy and alive, sending their patient signals across the vast underwater network that connects every sea on Earth. Their civilization flows, unlike the deep currents themselves, carrying the memory of the first waters and the promise that wisdom and wonder will always find a way to survive, even in the darkest depths where no surface light can reach.